Hey everybody, it's Tuesday. It's my favorite day of the week because I get to be here with you and work on recruiting with you all and talk a little bit about this process. So really fired up to be here tonight. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kara Hill and I am based out of Southern California. And I'm going to give everybody kind of a minute to load in here, but I'm super excited to be here tonight. I'm sad because Sam's not here. She went on vacation, but you get me. Yay. So we're going to get started here. First, I'll tell you a little bit about me. I started this company, My Recruiting Solutions, about 11 years ago. And over the last 11 years, I've just had this very, very cool opportunity to work with student athletes throughout this recruiting process. And I have had just this incredible opportunity to build relationships with coaches and players and families. And so I feel really, really blessed. But that's a little bit about me. And today we are going to dive right into this topic of just feeling discouraged in this recruiting journey. I feel that I'm hearing from so many people right now that are just very, very discouraged. I'm getting lots of DMs and messages about rejections and things of that nature. And so I thought it was so important that we, really just talk a little bit about what's happening right now, and talk a little bit about the process and what you can be doing to be more effective. So I am going to share my screen for those of you that are following here. And here we go. So a little bit about what's happening right now. If you're feeling stuck, just so you know, there are a lot of coaches right now that are hosting camps. And so if you feel like the feedback that you're getting is really, really slow, that is pretty normal. And so one thing that I want you to do is just take a deep breath. And I want you to take a step back and really evaluate. I need you to go back through all of your emails that you have sent and that you have received over the last 60 to 90 days. And parents, I would highly recommend that you are taking a look at all of this content and paying attention. Did your student athlete follow up with everybody that they were supposed to follow up with? Have they dropped the ball anywhere? Have they, followed up with texts or emails? Have they had messages on social media? You really need to sit down and look at everything that's gone on over the last 60 to 90 days. If you're getting all rejections, you really need to reevaluate your target list of schools and get evaluated. And so you need to rip the Band-Aid off here and make sure that you're targeting schools where you can actually play. You need to look at where you are academically, where you are athletically, and ensure that the list of schools that you have on your radar that you are reaching out to, that you're spending countless amount of hours, right? Sending emails, trying to text, trying to get a hold of these coaches. You need to make sure that you're focusing on schools that you can play at. So I would highly recommend getting an athletic evaluation. We do those assessments. So if you're looking for somebody to kind of help you with that, we can take a look at your film. We can look at the content that you've been sending out, like all of your emails and your highlights and things like that, and figure out what is going on. I would also recommend that you create a Scout Scholar account, and we're going to get into detail about that in a little bit. But Scout Scholar, if you go to scoutscholar.com, you can create an account, create a profile on there, and you can begin exploring every college program It'll allow you to stay organized and efficient in your recruiting journey. And that's going to be really important with everything that I'm going to tell you today. All of the feedback and the tips that I'm going to give you, you have to stay on point and stay organized in your journey, or you are going to have a very, very difficult time, or a more difficult time than what you've already had. Another thing that I want you to know right now is that things change all of the time. And what I think is going to happen this fall is that there's going to be a lot of movement among college coaches. There's going to be a lot of college coaching changes after this fall season. So if you are a 2022, you need to not panic. If you are a 2023 who's having a really hard time, you need to take a step back. Like I said, you need to reevaluate what you've done, and you need to take some time to, just breathe, take a breather. And then you've got to make sure that you're running a really proactive marketing campaign with programs where you can actually play. So we're going to talk about that in a bit. So if you're not hearing from college coaches at all, if they are either not responding to you, or if all of your emails that you're getting back are rejections, that tells me there's a couple of things going on wrong here, or a whole lot going on wrong. Okay. So the first thing could be the actual email length. If you are sending a complete biography, your entire life story in an email, it's going to be ignored. So you want to keep your emails about 6 to 8 sentences long so that you can be efficient. And you have to have film in there. If you do not have a highlight reel, there is no way for the college coach to be able to assess you. And if they can't evaluate your film and figure out where you are athletically, they're not going to respond, right? There's no reason to respond. In fact, 9 times out of 10, if you send an email without video, you're going to find that that email just lands right in the trash. So, be considerate of the college coach's time and make sure that you're including film. Another recommendation that I would have right now is to ensure that you're being really creative with your content. Your emails should stand out. I would not recommend sending an email that says, "Hi, coach, my name is, I'm interested in, I want to play at." I just think it's really boring. And if you put yourself in the college coach's shoes, they are getting hundreds, if not thousands of emails, depending on the program. And so if you're on the receiving end of getting all of those messages right now, you have to think about what would actually stand out. And so that's why I want you to, take a step back, really reevaluate what is everything that you've been doing over the last 90 days. Have you dropped the ball with anybody? Have you been sharing consistent highlights? Have you been creative with your content? And if all you're getting is rejections, then you need to consider that you might be aiming too high. You may not be able to play for a top, Division I program, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that recruiting is over or life is over just because you can't play at the Division I level. There are 2,000 college volleyball programs out there. So you really just need to take a deep breath, relax, block out all of the noise, and realize that there is a home there for you if you really want to play. But you need to be really patient, and you need to have a strategy to be successful in this process. I would tell you that most athletes that go through this recruiting process aim too high, and they only have high-level programs on their list, and they're not a high-level Division I player. And so if that's all you're focused on, it's going to be really, really challenging. So I'm based in Southern California. I work with kids from all over the world, but when I sit in my office and somebody comes into the office and tries to have a conversation with us, they will share some school names with us that happen to be some of the biggest names in our area. So they'll mention Pepperdine, they'll mention USC, UCLA, they'll mention Stanford, LMU, Santa Clara, just some, fabulous schools that are all throughout the state of California, which are awesome. But most athletes are not in that place that they can compete at that level. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. You need to rip off the Band-Aid and have a come to Jesus moment with yourself and figure out, where can you play? And if scholarship money is important to your family right now, there's so many challenges with money out there. There are programs that have these athletes that are going to use their extra year of eligibility. And so what's happening is it's having a trickle down effect with all of these other players that are trying to come into these programs. And so rosters are getting much larger right now. And, from a college coach's perspective, they're trying to figure out how they're going to manage these large rosters. What are they going to do to ensure the happiness and the success of their program, right? They want the athletes that are there to have a good experience, because if they're not having a good experience, they don't make very good salespeople when it comes to bringing in the new recruits that you need to continue to keep your program going. So, just take that into consideration, that at this stage of the game, you're going to have to cast a wide net, and you might have some programs in there where you're aiming high. And then you're going to have some programs that are on your list that are, a lot more realistic, and places where, you wouldn't necessarily have thought of. If you get an email response from a college coach and you look into the school and you go, I don't know. I don't know that I see myself there. I'm not really sure. I would tell you it's really important to schedule a call with that coach and learn a little bit about what that coach has to offer, what the program would be about. It may surprise you. You might get on the phone and think, I don't see myself at such and such institution, and then have a conversation and really hit it off with the coach. Maybe you like their coaching style or how they describe their program. And maybe they look at you and they really feel like you're somebody that could help, be a major asset in their program. I just think it's so important that right now you have a really open mind as you go through this process, and, just explore any and all options, because at the end of the day, you need options. In order to make the most educated decision, you want options. And to create options, you need leverage. And nobody wants to be lonely in recruiting you, which means you've got to cast a wide net. I'd recommend there's 75 schools on your list. Yes, that sounds like an incredible number, and it is, but you need to run a really proactive marketing campaign in order to create exposure and create engagement with these coaches, and ultimately to get options. So I would recommend you take a step back, get an athletic evaluation, look at where you are academically, create a target list of schools. You can use our software, Scout Scholar, to do that. If you're looking for help, that is what we do. We help you with your emails. We help you with creating that target list of schools based on where you are academically and athletically, and what your family is looking for from a financial perspective as well, which you also need to keep in mind. So you need to be casting a wide net, putting together a highlight reel, putting together some engaging content, email content, highlight reels, and you should be sending those things out. And going back to talking about, some of the challenges that are going on with COVID right now, obviously we've got a lot of programs that are at max capacity. And so some programs are going to be at a little bit of a standstill or a pause as we head into the fall and to the early part of the winter. We're going to see a pause as they figure out who on their roster plans to stay and who plans to graduate and move on. And I think those numbers are going to be changing all of the time. So just know that if you're getting a lot of we're full, or would you consider a walk-on position, I think you should be taking a step back and really evaluating, number one, financially, where does your family need to be? Can you make that work? And if you can't make that work, I would tell you to be super patient right now, to stay calm, to stay focused on your journey, to be running a very consistent campaign. And when I talk about consistency, that means if you are a 2022 or a 2023, you should be running a very aggressive marketing campaign where every couple of weeks you're sending out an updated email with an updated highlight reel. And so you should be casting a wide net, be running this campaign, and then you have to work the phone. So recruiting does not happen if you do not get on the phone and learn how to sell yourself. And that's another way to potentially lose interest or lose an offer. So if you're finding that you're having conversations with coaches and then it's just at a standstill and things are not continuing to escalate, or you don't feel like there's any progress in your recruiting journey, then I think it's really important that you take a step back and you reevaluate what you're asking on the phone and what you're sharing with coaches as well. Because part of getting on the phone is learning how to sell yourself. And I don't think there's enough emphasis on how to sell yourself on the phone and how to properly prepare for phone calls. You really need to think this through before you get on the phone and have a conversation with a coach who could make a decision, like that, whether to continue the process on with you or to let it go. And your first impression is a pretty lasting impression. And so making sure that you really spend some time doing your homework and thinking about some of the things that are important to you and putting yourself in the coach's shoes. Another thing I will tell you about everything that's going on right now is a lot of times as people are approaching these conversations, they're asking aggressive questions a little too early on in their process. And that might put a bad taste in someone's mouth as well. You kind of have to listen to the tone of the conversation that the coach is having with you, and then make an educated decision on how to take the conversation further. This sounds really complicated, and it is. I think that, at this stage, I would recommend that as a family, if you're not working with anybody, as a family, you need to be sitting down and having some pretty, intimate conversations at home about the things that are important, not only academically and athletically, but what you're looking for, geographically. Obviously, financially is a huge component in this. And then from a coaching perspective. Somebody on here just asked a question about when it's the right time to become more aggressive. And it just depends on how many conversations that you've had with these coaching staffs. Have you only talked to an assistant coach? Have you had a conversation with the head coach? You need to take that into consideration before you're pressing too much for information, because a recruiting coordinator isn't going to make the offer. A head coach is the one that's going to make the offer. So depending on the programs that you're targeting, you're going to have a different response with that question. What I will tell you is developing a marketing campaign is extremely important, and especially right now. We actually had a couple of athletes that were 2021s that ended up, did not want to compromise on the quality of their education, didn't want to compromise on, one of them didn't want to compromise on location, wanted to play Division I volleyball, could play Division I volleyball, didn't want to compromise on location, and really just stayed true and was so consistent with these coaches. And they had said, they didn't think they had a spot. They didn't think they had a spot. And then a spot had opened up. There was a coaching There was a player actually that ended up deciding to graduate. And so there became an opportunity for this player to end up in this particular program, and it worked out, but she stayed true to what she wanted. And she was so consistent. She reached out to these coaches and asked how they were doing and cheered them on during their season. So there's all kinds of strategies that you can use, but you need to understand you're really running a marketing campaign, and it's so important that you get that through your head. Especially in these times where we have tons of athletes in the transfer portal. We have all these players that are looking for a home, and these rosters are getting bigger, and this is just getting more and more challenging to get yourself recruited. So being consistent, sending updates is really important. Getting an advocate, whether you are working with us or you are working with, a recruiting coordinator at your club or your coaches, you need to find out what's going on in the programs for the coaches that are willing to share that information. And I would really try and understand where you are on someone's list so that you can, again, take a step back and reevaluate and figure out if you're spending your time in the right place. So that's something that I would definitely recommend. Going through here in terms of heading into this high school season and then going into this next club season, I've talked about working with your coach or your recruiting coordinator and how you can work with them. You can also work with your teammates. And this is something that might sound foreign to a lot of you. Many of you might feel threatened by your teammates or not necessarily want to share this information, but talk to each other. If a college coach tells you that they're looking for a middle and they liked your film, you should definitely recommend that your middle on your team reach out. And if you're a setter and that middle gets a message and they find out that that program's looking for a setter, you can learn to talk to each other. You don't need to feel threatened by your teammates. You need to find ways to work together and talk with each other about what coaches have shared with you in terms of what they're looking for. So if you have a close-knit team, especially, creating a Dropbox account, creating film and sharing so that everybody has film. For those that are younger that are going through this process, setting up campus visits are super powerful. So as you go to look at this next club season, so many people are already having tryouts or already have had tryouts, and you're starting to get an idea of what tournaments you're going to be attending. Parents and team parents, start thinking about what campuses you could potentially visit while you're on the road, and get on campuses together. Even if it means you can't get in touch with the coach, depending on your age, you can absolutely get on campus, explore. Even if you don't necessarily see yourself there, you would be so surprised what you can learn in these academic tours or these admissions tours when they have these students that are actually running them, and they talk about all the reasons that they chose a certain institution. That particular program may not be the best fit for you. However, you may find that there's something that you learn out of that experience, and then you end up asking other college coaches what it is that you're looking for after going through that experience. So you can work together at being more aggressive and running your marketing campaign. And the other thing that I would tell you in terms of working with your coaches and your recruiting coordinators is that you need to keep them informed. So if you have somebody that's really engaged in helping you, you need to make sure that you're communicating who you're talking to. And if things change with a program, you need to keep your recruiting coordinators updated with what's happening, what changes are happening. Because as a recruiting coordinator myself and somebody that does this for a living, when I'm hearing from college coaches, I may ask about a player and not know that that coach had already told that player no, or that coach may have already told that player yes and offered them a spot. And then it's kind of puts you in an uncomfortable position because you don't know. And so as if you've got a club coach or you've got a recruiting coordinator that you're working with, you always want to keep them in the loop with what's happening. So in our business, we actually ask our clients to forward us their emails so that we can go through and we try not to miss anything. So we're at least kept in the loop. And if you have a phone call, we want to hear from you. We want to know what happened in that phone call, because that prompts us with how to respond or how to follow up or how to reach out to a college coach and what we should say and what we shouldn't say, right? So there's a lot of little things that go on that, when you're first looking at this process, you may think, as you approach this process, that you're going to send out some emails and you're going to make some phone calls and this is just going to happen. But hopefully, by you watching this, workshop today and listening, you're starting to get a better idea and a bigger, see the bigger picture of what exactly is going on here. Because depending on your talent level and depending on who you are, there could be $250,000 on the line. You're not talking about a little bit of money. You're talking about an opportunity to potentially graduate debt-free. Or you may be, getting one of those golden tickets is what we talk about internally. If you're looking at going to an Ivy League institution or get a leg up into a top academic school with an acceptance rate of less than 8%, right? That would be considered kind of a golden ticket. And here you are, you have this awesome opportunity to get that ticket and to leverage volleyball to get a leg up into a top academic school. So those are some things that I think are really important to share with you. Like I said, I've heard so many people that have been feeling really, really discouraged. And so hopefully this gives you a little bit better perspective of what's happening right now. There's a lot of programs that are having camps right now. And so that is obviously impacting responsiveness in coaches, but make sure that you're engaging on Twitter. Get on social media and interact with coaches on Twitter. There's a lot of coaches that are on Twitter, and that's kind of a cool thing that you can use. And if you have cell numbers, you need to be working the phone. You have to work the phone. You cannot expect to get recruited by not working the phone. It's just not going to happen. I'm going to answer a couple of questions here. There's a couple that are the same. Somebody asked, can you give a brief example of what a creative email might look like? So that's a really great question. I'll give you the example that I actually used with a player that I worked with today. This player comes from a very competitive background. Her sisters have all played Division I volleyball. Her mom is a Division I volleyball coach. Dad is an athletic director for a major institution. And so, obviously there's a lot of family ties here when it comes to this particular family. And so one of the things that we talked about in terms of the things that she had done over the weekend was they played this ping pong tournament, and everything in this household, they're all super big competitors. And so we talked about how to, discuss her family's lineage and their athletic, their competitiveness, their family competitiveness, even in playing in, games at home. And so she's actually going to be working on an email that kind of ties everything together about coming from, a family of Division I volleyball players. Everything we do in this household is competitive, including our family ping pong tournament. That's creative. It's engaging, it's different, it's unique, and you are going to get a chuckle out of a college coach who is probably going to have something maybe snarky to say about this tournament and wanting to know who won. I mean, the reality is that when you're looking and you're approaching this process, you need to understand that you're running a marketing campaign and that you need to be likable, and you need to have fun with it. And you need to know that these college coaches are not your college professors. And these are people that are going to build these long-standing relationships with you and probably go to your wedding one day and, be a part of, your life for many years to come, depending on how active you are with the program after you leave. But that's how I want you to look at the process. And so in terms of getting creative, you need to be unique. You need to think about ways that you can start a conversation that doesn't start with, "Hi, coach, my name is," because everybody sends that and it's just not that unique. So just think about that. I had another question on here that is, what would I say are aggressive questions? Aggressive questions in your process would be questions that ask about a scholarship. Do you have a scholarship, or are you going to scholarship me? Where am I on your list? That's a pretty aggressive question. And you need to think really, really, really wisely and closely as to whether or not you want to ask that question. And you need to understand that there are repercussions to these questions, that you could be putting a bad taste in someone's mouth by asking these questions, depending on the timeline of this process and where you are in conversation with these coaches. So that's one thing to understand. If this is your first call, you can't ask the coach, "Where am I on your list? Are you going to offer me? What does my scholarship look like?" If you're the top recruit in the country, then sure. If you have option after option after option and you need to get serious because you have so many offers, then you can get aggressive. So in terms of when to be aggressive, you become more aggressive as you get college coaches that make offers to you, and your timeline gets moved up as a result because you're having all these offers. And so the questions don't come across as so aggressive if you're saying, "Hey, coach, I got an offer from such and such institution, and I'm really considering it. This could be a good fit for me, but I rank your school higher on my list, so I'd like to get a better understanding as to where I am." It also has to do with how you verbalize these questions. And the problem with being a teenager without any parent involvement in this process, which some families do, they don't have a whole lot of involvement as parents, is that your athletes ask inappropriate questions, or they say things that they shouldn't say. So you have to keep in mind that there's $250,000 on the line. And even if scholarship money isn't important to your family, it doesn't mean that you would turn it down. And so you still need to understand that even a spot in this market is very, very valuable. If your child is being offered a spot right now, whether it be a walk-on, whatever opportunity it is, you need to take a step back and really think about that. You need to be very grateful. You need to be super thankful right now, and make sure that you are showing your gratitude and your appreciation to that coach for making that offer. And then you need to take a step back and figure out if it's the right fit or not. And if it's not, what can you do to leverage that offer? Because at the end of the day, nobody wants to be lonely in recruiting you. You need options. But to create options, you have to go through this process. And it's not a magical process. It's a very long and intensive process. It takes a lot of time for most athletes, and it can be really challenging. So just take that into consideration as you go through this journey, that this is not going to just be magical, and there aren't going to be all these programs that are lining out the door to offer you a lot of money. Another question that I have here is, what are ways to get younger recruits, 2024s and 2025s, on a college's radar? At this stage of the game, you really need to be casting a wide net. As a rising freshman or a rising sophomore, I really think that you need to be very active in your recruiting process. I feel very, very strongly that as a rising freshman, you should begin your process now. And there's a lot of reasons for this. It doesn't mean that your recruiting process is going to go any better. It doesn't mean that it's going to be any easier, but it's giving you more time to consider what you want. It's giving you more time to consider which camps to visit, like which camps should you go to and participate and start getting a feel for these coaching styles. As you get on these campuses and you have these interactions, you are going to learn something every single time you step foot on a campus or meet with a coach. So as a rising freshman or a rising sophomore, rising sophomores, you're the next call. Like, that's how college coaches look at you. You're the next call. So you're not really that young. You're less than a year away. You now are less than 11 months. It's like just about 11 months before you get on the phone. Well, when you start looking at your calendar and you look at high school volleyball and club volleyball and holidays and vacations and everything that goes into it, when are you going to visit these campuses? And when are you going to go to these camps? All the camps are stacked on top of each other, right? We're seeing that now. Every camp is on top of each other in the month of July. Some programs couldn't have any camps this year due to COVID. And the ones that did, you know, a lot of them kept their numbers smaller. They didn't all get to blow them up like they normally do. So I think you need to take all of that into consideration. And you need to understand that it's extremely competitive, and running a proactive marketing campaign beginning your freshman year is only in your benefit. It's only going to help you. It's going to help you create more exposure. It's going to help you get on more radar. It's going to help you in every aspect of this process. And it's even going to help you make a decision. Even though you can't talk to a Division I college coach until June 15th of your sophomore year, there's so much that goes on before you even have that conversation. And that's really, really important for you to take into consideration. I'm looking at some of these other questions that are coming in. Somebody asked about getting emails. If you've emailed coaches and they haven't responded, do you email again or call? My gut is you're targeting programs that are just not an athletic fit. That's my goal. We did the creative emails. Somebody asked, when you say work the phone, do you mean contact after the college expresses interest after receiving your email, seeing your highlights, watched you play? What do you mean about basically picking up the phone? So when I say to work the phone, I think that when a college coach sends you an email and shows interest and you are of age where you can have a conversation with the coach. So if you don't know the NCAA rules, that's a whole separate conversation that we'd have to have at another time. But if you're within the NCAA rules for you to have a conversation with a coach, and a coach sends you an email and there's interest, you are a fool not to pick up that phone and to be trying to schedule a call. You should be texting that coach. You should be messaging that coach. You should be doing everything you can to get on the phone with the coach, because you have to work the phone in order to get recruited. And if you don't, I promise you somebody else will. So when a coach expresses interest in you, whether it's an email, a text, whether they call your club coach, if you have the ability to have a conversation with a college coach, you need to be working on scheduling that call so that you can have a candid conversation with the coach about, you know, their program, and you can start to learn about the majors and what the athletes on the team are studying, and you can start learning and building a relationship with this coach. Everything we talk about is about building relationships. You're trying to build a relationship with the coach, and you're trying to learn as much as you can about the school and the program. You're not going to learn it all in one call. You have to understand that once you have one call, another reason that, you know, processes stall is that student athletes aren't proactive and reaching out for the next call. They're not staying in consistent communication with the coach. I saw an athlete that I had connected with who had an offer from a program and hasn't communicated with the coach in over 2 weeks. So these are examples that I share that I think are important for you to keep in mind, because you need to understand that you're not the only fish in the sea. And so if you're not engaged and showing that interest, then unfortunately, it could turn into a missed opportunity with your lack of communication or lack of follow through. And coaches determine your interest by how often you communicate. Somebody else asked a question about scholarships trickling down. Is there a deadline for current players to let colleges know that they are or are not returning? And is that taking up 23 scholarship opportunities? Everything that's happening right now is absolutely making an impact in the 22, 23, 24 recruiting class, big time. So even though 24s aren't even there and having conversations yet, it is absolutely going to impact their recruiting class, because you have athletes that have the additional year of eligibility. And remember, you can also take a redshirt year. So you have athletes that have an additional year of eligibility, plus they can take a redshirt year. This can delay a lot for years to come, which means it is more competitive, it is harder to get recruited, and it's extremely important that you are running this process. And I would, as a family, prepare that even if you have a very, very talented player, there is a chance that you are going to have to pay for a year of your kid's education. There were a lot of coaches that we had talked to that had told players, hey, we don't have money in your first year. I know of players right now that are going into their freshman year that their deal changed throughout this year. We know people that are 2022s that, had full scholarship offers and had committed, early. And those athletes are being told that they may not have the money that was promised to them. In terms of a deadline for current players to let a college coach know whether they're returning or not, the feedback that I've gotten from a lot of college coaches has been, do not put pressure on your players to make a decision as to whether they're going to stay or go. And I think most college coaches as well are looking at this and just seeing that, since this is a parent asking this question, think about where you were and what decisions you were making when you were 18 to 24 years old. Everybody makes different decisions. And so coaches are not putting too much pressure on anybody having to make a decision, and athletic departments as a whole are not encouraging coaches to put pressure on any of the players, because they feel like putting pressure isn't going to necessarily give them an answer. In fact, you may end up pushing somebody out that's a valuable part of the program that could help your program. I just think that this means that college coaches have a lot more power than they've had in some regards, right? When it comes to these future generations of college programs that are coming into these programs. And there's a lot of options. There's some coaches that are paying attention to the transfer portal, and transfers are being, valued higher than a underclassman who is trying to get recruited for the first time. There's a lot of things that are going on here that, families aren't necessarily aware of, because this isn't, what you do. So, just keep that in mind. You've got to take a deep breath. You've got to run a proactive process. You've got to run this marketing campaign, and you need to have a come to Jesus and make sure that you're targeting schools where you can actually play, and that you're not wasting time and money going after a program that you can't necessarily play athletically. Like, if you're not good enough, you're just not good enough. It doesn't mean that you can't play at the next level. It just means that maybe you can't play in the Big Ten or, the SEC or the ACC or wherever it is you're targeting. And I'm telling you, for a lot of people, when they start this process, especially, they end up targeting all of these schools, and it takes a while before you can hear from those coaches for them to be able to say, hey, we want the best for you and we wish you the best of luck, and we need to let you know that, we don't have a home for you. So just keep that in mind as you go through the process. I am going to wrap up for today. I will be around to answer questions tomorrow. For those that registered for our webinar, I'll be following up with families this week. For those of you that are on Insta, feel free to DM me and request a meeting that way. I'm happy to connect with you. But for those that have joined us online, I truly appreciate you. And I will send a follow-up message and be in touch over these next couple of days. So thank you so much for your time. I hope you learned something today, and I look forward to talking to you all soon. So thanks so much. Have a good day. Bye.